What's up, guys? Welcome back to another daily Bible reading snapshot. Today we're reading Judges 10 and 11 in the Old Testament. And at the beginning of Judges chapter 10, we find out about two judges. We don't know much about them, but what we see here is Tola and Jair. They are people who judge Israel for a short amount of time. Obviously, we don't know much about their story, but this at least includes them in the record as people who saved Israel and led the people, at least different pockets of people, for a short amount of time. But the main emphasis of chapter 10 is that the people of Israel continue to sin, and God brought a bigger enemy into the picture. So before, it was like these different enemies were kind of taking out little portions and little pockets of the people of Israel. But now he's going to bring a bigger enemy, and it's the enemy of the Ammonites. So the Philistines in the west coast were already kind of harassing the Israelites in their land, but now this group from the east is going to come in, and they are going to cause some serious problems for the Israelites. So kind of like with the Midianites, where the Midianites seem to not only be oppressing just a small portion, they seem to be oppressing a big portion of the Israelites. Same thing is going to happen now with the Ammonites, and that sets up Judges 11. And Judges 11 is all about a guy named Jephthah, who he's most well known for the dumbest decision he ever made. And we'll get to that in a minute. But Jephthah, it says, was from Gilead, which is on the east side of the Jordan. It says he was from there. His father was famous, but the problem was he was not born from one of the wives of Gilead. He was born from an unfaithful marriage. So it's like, okay, he's the guy who should not be included in all the family parties, so he is uninvited from a lot of family parties, and that's what happens. He is banished. They don't want him around. But the problem is, he grows up to be a pretty strong warrior, and it's not like he goes back to take revenge or anything like that. It's just that the Ammonites start to oppress the Gileadites, the people from the family of Gilead, and they say, we don't know who to call. We should call our little brother who turned out to be a crazy warrior. Let's call him. He's from the land of Tob. So they go over, call him from the land of Tob, and he comes back reluctantly. Jephthah does not really want to fight for the Gileadites because he grew up with them a little bit, but he was banished, right? He had a lot of, I'm sure, ill will towards those people because that was his family, and they got rid of him. They dumped him because they didn't like who his mom was. So anyway, that happens, and then Jephthah goes and finally agrees to fight for the Gileadites. And when he does that, he goes and confronts the Ammonites and gives a big, long history lesson, which I think Judges 11, there's a big portion of Judges 11 which serves as a history lesson, which I think is really helpful because it reminds us, the reader, what happened, because the Ammonites are lobbing some false accusations at the Israelites, like, you oppressed us when you came out of Egypt, and it's like, no, you didn't even let us come through your land. They had to go around. They had to stay in the wilderness. The Ammonites were really the bad guys back then. So remember, this is maybe 100 years or a couple hundred years afterwards. So anyway, Jephthah has this talk with them, and then Jephthah says, okay, I'm going to fight the Ammonites, and Jephthah talks to God, and he says to God, I promise, whatever walks out of my house first, after you give me the victory, whatever walks out of my house first, I'm going to give to you as a burnt offering. You remember what the burnt offerings were? They would kill those burnt offerings, and then they would burn them as a sacrifice to the Lord. So, whatever walks out of my house, maybe you see where this is going. He probably shouldn't have offered that to God. He shouldn't have promised that, because it's not like he just said, hey, God, if you want this, you can have this. He says, no, I'm going to do this no matter what. I've committed. My word is out. There it is. Okay. So we'll see what happens. God gives them victory. What's the first thing that comes walking out of Jephthah's house? Was it a lamb? Was it a goat? Was it something big like a bull or a cow? No, it was his daughter, his only daughter. And because of this stupid, rash vow that he makes, he has to offer this daughter as a sacrifice. And a lot of people debate what this means because it seems like she goes out and weeps that she never gets to get married and have kids. What did this all mean? Well, if you see what's been happening in the book of Judges, the descent of sin is just getting worse and worse and worse the farther they get away from God. And I don't think that a burnt offering can really be interpreted any other way than he killed his own daughter, which is horrible. And again, why does this happen? Okay? It reminds us, and it should remind us, of a verse in the book of Proverbs. This is Proverbs 29:20. It says, do you see a man who is hasty in his words? There is more hope for a fool than for him. And that should be a helpful lesson to us. we should not be making any rash promises, any promises that we don't know that we can fulfill, because it was so foolish of Jephthah to do this. Even though God gave them the victory, it was really a defeat for Jephthah, and that's what he's most famously known for. So that's our reading for today for Judges 10 and 11. In the New Testament, we're looking at Luke chapter 9, and we're actually covering a lot of ground here in Luke chapter 9, because at the beginning, Jesus is sending out these 12 apostles, and he gives them some instructions, and it even says that Herod hears about all the stuff that Jesus is doing, and he's a little confused because he had just killed John the Baptist. Herod was a little superstitious maybe, thinking that maybe John the Baptist has raised from the dead. And also it says that Jesus feeds the 5,000, which is a story that we read in the other Gospels, but we see it again here. Also that Peter says that Jesus is the Christ. That's another thing that we read in the other Gospels. And also, right after that, what happens is, very quick succession, Peter confesses that Jesus is the Christ. Jesus starts to say, hey, the Christ is going to have to suffer, Isaiah 53 and all that stuff, the suffering servant, that's me. I have to suffer too. And they're not quite okay with that. So Jesus also says, yes, I'm the Christ. Yes, I need to suffer. You're going to need to suffer too. And then some of you are not going to taste death till you see this glory. And then what happens next is the transfiguration. So it's the same progression of steps as we see in the book of Matthew and the book of Mark. So just interesting that they're all put together here. And I think that's because Matthew, Mark, and Luke all want us to see this as one big, long conversation, one thing after another. So what can we learn from this? Well, I think one of the big things is here, there's a very unique set of instructions here. If you want to come after Jesus, you need to take up your cross daily and follow him. The lessons that Jesus teaches about following him in this world, I think that set of verses from verse 23 to verse 26 is just so important for you. So make sure you look at those verses, and this would be a great day to study those verses. Maybe do a TAN on those verses, then, always, now. If you know the TAN method from Partners or from Train, that would be an important thing to do, because I think there's so much right there for us to take away. As we follow Christ daily, we want to be people who are not only saying we follow Christ, saying we're Christians, going to church on the weekends. That's not all we want to be. We want to be people who are taking up our cross daily and understanding what that means. So take some time and try to understand what that means. Study this one. This is an important passage, and it'll be important for the rest of your life. So thanks for reading the Bible with us. We'll see you back tomorrow for another daily Bible reading snapshot.